And here we are. So welcome, family. If you're coming back because you've heard this voice before, it means that you and I have been on this journey of growing our future readiness community. So well done. If you're new to this podcast, welcome. We love growing our circles. I'm told that the last time we've got a new relative in Alaska, which is a beautiful thing. But what's consistent about our podcast is that we are always finding human beings who are using their unique skills and talents from everywhere in the world to advance the human family. And I made this promise to you from the beginning that when I find them, I will bring them into the circle to share because sharing is caring. And of course, today we have another amazing human being. I've now started calling her Sisi, and it is so proud. But I'll let Pearl introduce herself. I'll give you just a bit about how Pearl and I got together. We got together through a friend who spoke to me and said, "Thank you for speaking to me, but you have to speak to this other person because I know that the two of you are just going to connect like a house on fire." That was life after COVID. And so Pearl is my post-COVID connect and wonderful, wonderful CC. So Pearl, welcome and good morning from here. So explain to people why I'm saying good morning from here. So welcome.
How? Hi, everyone. And thank you so much, Zal, for having me on. You are saying good morning because you are based in South Africa, in Umzansi, and I am based in Perth, in Western Australia, and it's afternoon where I am. And this is the miracle of technology that we can see each other and speak to each other in different time zones.
Yes, that is the joy indeed. But so tell me, how does a girl from Durban end up in Australia? Because it's fun, and don't tell us you swam there. So I know there's a story.
I love it. I am from Durban, and I am from the clan of the Mazalas. So the Mazalas are, well, the Mazala lands are to the south of Durban, about an hour south along the coast. And our people and my people have been there for a very long time, generations. But I grew up in the city, so I am a Durban girl, but I am a Mazala girl. And my mother moved to the city from Mazala lands into Durban before I was born, and then I was born in Durban. How do I come to be in Perth? As with most things on the planet, love moves everything. So I came to be in Perth because of love.
Oh my
Because when
word.
you are in an airport, and airports are very big these days, as you know, and I sometimes look across a sea of people, thousands of people in terminals, and I often just distill all of that movement down to the motivation of love, moving all of those people to go across the globe. Sometimes people are moving for jobs as they are flying from here to there, but most of the people are usually, connecting to go and reconnect or connect with loved ones somewhere. So love moved me across the Indian Ocean, and I landed in Perth. When the person who invited me to come, to marry him and then to come and live in Western Australia, I thought Australia, Austria, Australia, Austria, and I was trying to work out which one was which. And deep inside, I was hoping it was not Austria because I do not like cold climates. And with relief, I landed on Australia. Yes, it's the hot one. So here I am. After 36 years, I am a dual citizen. I traverse two continents. I am dual in many ways because I have two homes, two continents, and two of a whole range of things that you and I are going to explore today.
Wow, that is so rich. I love this premise that love moved you, right? And that love connects because part of what happens, in fact, we're having this conversation at breakfast the other day, that love as a term has become so bastardized, but also so diminished that we use it for everything. I love latte. I love a hot day. I love my mother. And there isn't a distinction of what is the caliber of the love you're speaking about. So I'm suspecting that the love of which you speak is a love that the Greeks call agape, the love
Yes.
of other, but also the love of humankind, the love of living beings, right?
Yes, and it's also eros, the love of romance, or the romantic love. So it's both
Yeah.
for me. There was a calling when I was about 8. I had a visit, a spiritual visit, and I was advised that I was going to leave the continent at some point. And I didn't have a concept of what that meant fully, nor when it was going to happen. So when I was asked in the name of love to come out to the continent of Australia, something in me remembered the visit that I'd had at 8, that I was going to leave the continent. And I realized that that time had come. So it is the love of humanity, because we all have ancestral lines, and our ancestors speak to us and they divine what our lives are going to be about. And for some of us who are initiated as healers, we are tasked with carrying out the wishes of ancestors and providing healing, which is what my life's purpose is, essentially. So it was a love of humanity, but also it was the eros kind of love, because something had to move me to get on the plane.
Get you out of there. I'm interested in, because you've just touched on something that's really poignant here. This understanding that the dimension, an additional dimension to who we are, is a spiritual dimension. What did you understand at 8 about that visit, Pearl? Did it even, like, because at 8 we just want lollipops and dolls and playing like Yamatini Apandre and things like that. But who contextualized this for you?
I think there was just a deep intuitive sense. I think when you are born with this gift and you're part of this lineage, it's almost as if you know things you do not know, because they are in your fiber, they are in your being. So I was born this way, born to see and hear, or born to respond to a calling which I didn't have a name for. Now we have it as an intuition, or maybe just a sense of something. But when I was visited, it was a very, well, first of all, we had a house where we shared bedrooms as kids. And then our house was extended so that I ended up with my own bedroom, which was my biggest wish in life at the time. Yes. Yeah. Which, as you know, from back in the days, that was a better luxury. So there I was in my room, feeling totally blessed that I have a space where I can close the door. I was always a child who needed to have some quiet as well as some interactive time. So the fact that I could actually have my own space and close the door it was like heaven had arrived, I tell you. So this particular day, I'm laying on my bed, and I was one of those peculiar African kids who listened to classical music, Western classical music. And I used to turn on the classical radio station in South Africa and listen to classical music. Something about it moved me. I related to it. I think because it didn't have words, there was something about the evocation of emotion and spirit in it. And I still do love classical music. But I was strange because everybody was playing that doof doof, and that there was sort of in my room retreating and playing classical music. So I had been in one of those very restful, almost meditative spaces, looking out the window at the clouds. And I used to it was spontaneously as a child going to a meditative state as a way of centering. Again, I have language now I did not have then. So I'm laying on my bed and I'm closing my eyes and listening to this music. The movement of this particular piece ends, and there's a little bit of a hiatus. And in that silence, I then vision someone coming, an energy and a being, I can describe what he looked like, comes through the window, and I go into a different state. So I was no longer sort of here in a conscious sense. I was sort of in between. And the most beautiful, and I mean beautiful, light and energy and being. Like I knew that this person was ethereal, came from another dimension, had all this power and this beauty and the spirit, which was just mind-boggling as a child. But because I'd been to service and church and had a sense of spirituality and faith, I wasn't overwhelmed, but I was in awe. And the being told me that they were a guide for me, and they'd come from, they've traveled through millennia with me, and this time they've come to tell me something important that I'm going to need to remember all of this lifetime. And he then told me a few things, including the fact that I'm going to need to be in a state of readiness for things that are going to be indicated and revealed to me as I go through life, including the fact that I was going to go far away. I was going to be going to another continent. And all of that is going to come to pass. And I needed to just be open and be in a state of readiness. I remember I didn't say anything about this visit after I sort of finished. I went into a particular state. I think I stayed in a very meditative state for a period after it ended, and then sort of came to. And I reflected on it quite deeply in the coming days, but I never told anyone. And my mother was a very spiritual person. She was meant to have gone through an initiation to be a sangoma, and she refused when she was much younger. So, but she always carried that energy, and she had that sort of level of, dis-ease in her body, because, there was something that was meant to express that was not expressing through her. And that was normal for me, to have a mother who could tell you when it was going to rain. She could tell you if something was going to change. She could tell you something was going to happen. And I think I just normalized those things. But not worth it. Yeah. So I knew that I could speak to her about all dimensions. But for some reason, I actually never shared this particular visit with her or anyone. It was something that I felt at some level was just meant for me. And at some point, it was going to come to manifest. And so it did.
This is incredible, because you're touching on, firstly, a wisdom that defies words, a sense of understanding that arrives at an age when so many of us are still out there playing with dolls and all sorts of things, but also this idea of trust, right? Because oftentimes we've now come to a place where we now know that if you resist the flow, you're not going to win, because the flow is always
yes. Yes.
But it's true. We do this in business, we do this in relationships, we do this with our siblings and our families. We are always resisting, because somehow somebody said, if it's not painful, then clearly it can't be worth it, right? Or if it doesn't have strive, then it means you haven't applied yourself. So here you are, so many years later in Australia. How are you now making sense of what that invitation and invocation was those many years ago?
Right. Well, that's been a journey of revelation at every turn for some decades now. I've been in Australia for 36 years. And so it's been decades long in terms of its manifestation. When I was at home, I carried on growing as a child, finished primary school, went into high school, went into, college, went into banking, the usual things, without an awareness of the fact that I was actually quite strange, because I could sense things. I thought everybody had an intuition or something that they related to other people in a similar way. It was years later that I realized that actually wasn't the case. But I then left South Africa to come out to Australia, the Eros invitation, and settled here. And I would go home to visit, come back to Mzansi to visit family. And for some period, I had a sense that something quite ominous and quite life-changing was being prepared and was going to happen. So this was a message for me that was very frequent, that was very pervasive, and the messaging took 5 years to manifest. I was already but at the end, I was in a state of such agitation, thinking, what is this about? Because you keep being, indications keep coming that something is going to happen that you need to be ready for. And as it happened, my mom passed. And before she passed, I came out to Mzansi to visit, stopped in Johannesburg, met someone who's a healer. I had no idea how he was going to feature in my life at all. Someone was seeing this person. They said, do you want to go in and see what this person might say to you? He ended up telling me that my mother was going to pass, that I needed to go home and prepare. So I'm just landing in Mzansi, thinking I'm seeing family. I stopped in Johannesburg. I had a second mother in Johannesburg and spend time with her. I see this person very, very inadvertently. Got down to Durban, but I knew that I had been tasked with something quite important. Again, intuitively, there was just a trust that this meant what this was important, and it meant to it was meant to happen. So I go home and I do a bit of a ritual, get my sisters together, have a feast, acknowledge my mom. My mom sits me down, again, totally unplanned. I didn't declare anything to her. She instructs me for 3 hours. And it was her way of imparting things that were important. I didn't quite know exactly that this was going to be the last time I'm going to spend time with her and my mother and my siblings. I fly back to Mzansi, and not that long after she passes. And then, of course, we then have to farewell her, do the whole thing, come back, estates, the whole thing, come back to Australia. And it was that visit that was preceded my mom's passing, when I met the person who then became my, mentor for Uktwasa.
Yes.
And that was the person that ancestors or Madlala had chosen for me. And it was revealed to me just before my mother passed, and paved the way for me to do the things that meant to happen for my mother before she passed. The long story, and in a short version, is I ended up coming home so very frequently, Gizo Twasa, and went through the initiation process until I finished. And it was accelerated because I was already quite developed in terms of the senses you need to have. I just needed to have practical know-how and learn practical things that need to be happening when you are doing healing and doing ceremony. But the fact that I was already in Australia was curious, because I think I'm the only person who is a Sangoma, who's a practicing Sangoma, who lives outside of the continent, especially in this particular continent. And as you would know, people like us don't leave home. So this was something that was designated quite early in my life when I had the visit. And now it has come to pass that I'm of 2 continents, and I have carried ancestral wisdom and African healing wisdom to another continent. And I'm connecting with First Nations people in Australia, Indigenous people in Australia. And we are starting to have dialogues that are going to be quite interesting, are proving to be quite interesting. And I note now that there was always a reason why I was on this continent, maybe not somewhere else.
Yes. Also, because it takes us right back to the place of what is the role of love in restoring wholesomeness, right? Because the role of love in restoring wholesomeness is what you're talking about, right? This idea of healing, because healing at its core is a declaration that something needs to be made whole again.
Yes,
right?
yes, and be reconnected. So, and I mean, as you know, as most of us, well, a lot of us on the planet today know, we all, as we live on the planet today, came from Africa. We came from Southern Africa. We're actually Africans who then went to populate all of the continents that exist. And there's something about messages that come from home, everybody's birthplace, that need to come out and be taken to the people who are now of other continents, to be reminded of the oneness of all of us and also where we came from. So for me, it feels like it's a privilege to be an emissary for that messaging, for me to be an embodiment of where we all began, and bring messages from home in the deeper sense of home, and also to reconnect the energies that are out on other continents with the original energy that we all come from.
That is ridiculously beautiful. There's a responsibility, Pearl, right? That comes with the gift. So
yes,
walk me through the balancing act then of how do I give effect to this gift, either through professional engagements or personal guidance or whichever other sphere you work in, and understanding the responsibility you carry. Because I think when we were younger, and because we turned 30 last year, so when we were younger, I was 24 last week, there was a notion where we were so, I guess, enamored with this idea of being the only Black girl in the room, the only that. We also would ignore the elders who were saying to us, you're standing on the shoulders of queens and kings before you, because we didn't want to acknowledge that, because if you acknowledge that there were people before you, then it means you are not special, right?
Yes.
now we recognize that actually, no, we may be unique, but we are not fantastic. We didn't just materialize from our fantasticness, right? There
Yes.
were people before us.
Yes, and it was bestowed upon us for a purpose. So if we remember what Dr. Madiba said about the greatness in each of us and how we need to be embracing the greatness and not be intimidated by it and not to shy away from it. He was most likely speaking for all ancestors, for all of the people who come before us, who see greatness in us because we are a manifestation of them. And this oneness of humanity is all of our ancestors together, seeing the greatness that's there, that we have potential to be. So if you are a healer like myself, there is a mandate you are given. There is a responsibility you are given, but there's also an honor that you are given. So part of going through initiation process is to learn the how. You reconnect with the what. And then you also have the whom revealed to you. Because I have visits. I know what ancestors who work with me look like. And I go into spaces and I commune, they visit. It's a whom, it's a what, it's a how. And then the when is when the time came for me to come out onto the continent here, but also to have the realization that I'm of two continents and most likely all continents. And the ways that one then practices and expresses the mandate can vary. There are a lot of people who are healers in the world. There are a lot of people who are open to being messengers in the world, who stand for healing, who stand for what's good and pure, and who connect us all back to love. We come across people like this. You come across someone in whose spirit is so expansive that it reminds us of how big and how deep and how magnificent we are, right? Because they don't have to be initiated into being healers, but they carry the spirit of healing. So it's all of that. And for me, I have the means, because I have practice. So when you're a Sangoma, you have rituals and you have ways of recentering and times of recentering. And there's a rationale that's based, that's conveyed to you when you are going through your initiation as to why that's important. But in the practice of coming back to center, of going and to your altar, of putting a candle on and manifesting light and connecting with light, those rituals just remind you of why it's important to be a messenger and have an energy field that is able to be a conduit for things, not an energy field that's going to be blocked and preoccupied with the daily only. So it lifts, and you can, be both in the daily, doing the things that human beings need to do because you're in a body, but you also have a spiritual dimension that you go into, which then enables the other aspects to actually express. So when I was speaking earlier about this duality, it's not just two continents, it's also two states of being able to traverse between them, being able to be alone and be at one with everyone at the same time. Being able for me to work as a psychologist, to work as a consultant, but also knowing that I'm a healer. So whatever whatever title I might be carrying at any given time in this Western context, I'm actually essentially a healer who's taking healing into those spaces, but also using those spaces as a medium.
You don't understand the things that you are shifting inside me at this moment, because there's a superficiality in the world when we start speaking about inclusivity, or we start speaking about intersectionality, right? Because somehow, unless it is named in the Western world, it is demoted of its value. Right?
Or it doesn't exist, or it doesn't exist in the lexicon. Yes.
It is completely erased, right? So to have somebody say, I have a gift that has been bequeathed to me by people who preceded all of you, is a proper clap back, I think, to the, if I don't have a name for it, then it doesn't exist. But the question I have for you then is, how do you confront No, I don't even know if you confront these things, Pearl, but how do you respond to the ignorance that may come from this place that I've just described? Surely you can't tell me that you can combine psychology and African things. I mean, surely psychology is a lot more superior to African things. For people who are listening, I'm just shaking my head to give effect to how ignorance manifests at times.
Shaking the head. Yeah, you said something earlier about being the only person in the room. Being the only type, whatever the type it might be. I arrived in Perth, in Western Australia, as one of a handful, and I mean a handful of Black people here. So people who were African who arrived here before me, like handful, then arrived. And we all knew one another because there was nobody else, like nobody else. And this journey where you are settling into a continent, a culture, a country where you look different and you are made differently, but also you need to embrace your uniqueness and your difference so fully that you take it into spaces comfortably. And I'm very used to being the only Black person in the room. Like I'm so used to it, it doesn't even register as it might be for someone else. I'm also very used to being the only Black woman in a room. And this bequeathing means that I know before I enter any space I'm in that I belong in that space. Before I get there, I know I belong there. Because the ancestors do not put me in spaces that they haven't cultivated for me. There is a pathway that's already cultivated for me. So when I arrive at a place, I'm walking on a path that's already been, laid down for me, prepared for me. And the ignorance that you're talking about is, manifold in the world. There are people who do not know yet. There are people who do not know that they do not know. And you encounter all kinds of not knowing. But also there are people who know, who deny, who choose other or choose otherwise. So you encounter all kinds of not knowing or choices not to know. I made a vow some years ago now that I was not going to engage in spaces where I needed to convince anyone of anything or go into hot debates about anything or minimize, shame, diminish any living being about anything. I let people be where they need to be, comfortable in where they are. And my job is to present something different for them to see, to encounter, to be impacted by, so that then they can reflect, integrate what they're ready to integrate, shift what they're ready to shift. It's not my job to take them there. They are beings themselves. They can get themselves there.
So I struggle sometimes in letting people arrive at their own Everest. Because you have such a desire for people to experience differently that you almost want to say, how do you not see that your life will be so much better if you take this medicine that I'm giving to you? So how did you cultivate that level of grace and patience and the ability to say, Zah, this is what could work for you, but you can get there in your own time?
Yes, so that's an interesting question to ask, because I observed when I was younger that, people of faith would come to the door and they'd be letting you know that you needed to see the light so that you can be saved and go to heaven. And it was their job to convince you to be born again, so that you can actually elevate to heaven one day. And there are people in the world who are so moved to encounter something they feel is a truth, and typically it's a faith, and they feel compelled, or it's part of their faith, to advise / convince others that this is the way to go. I've never had that inclination. Even when I was quite young, it was always an approach for me, which was quite instinctive, that faith was a personal journey. And I went as far as to actually visit every denomination of a church when I was young, to see how they carried service out, what their rituals were, what their preachings were, so that I would be informed. And having done all of that as a young person, I came back to faith being a very personal journey. And I arrived in Australia. I think I went to maybe 3 or 4 services, because my grandfather was a Methodist / Uniting Church, United Congregational Church pastor, and he ran a mission church down in Port Shepstone area. And I realized, I would have been in my 20s, that it's not really for me to go and hear about faith. I needed to practice faith. That was my mission in life, was to practice faith. So I don't have an inclination to go to church. I have definitely never had an inclination to sell a message, convince other people to believe what I believe or what I see as truth. And then when I went to university, one of my degrees was literature. And we studied quite extensively a whole range of theories in literature that were purporting to explore the truth, as in big T truth.
Yes.
It then removed any last residue of any desire to think that I had an idea of what truth with the big T was for other people. And I also made a decision, I think I was still in my 20s still, that I was really never going to be one to follow a messiah or to follow a guru. It wasn't a path that was meant for me in life. So I don't hand my power over to others to tell me how to live life and how to be a decent human being or how to listen to spirit. It's something that I was born with. When I went through the initiation process, as I said before, I was learning the how to conduct process, to conduct ceremony, but also I was learning how to be with spirit. You need a certain level of quiet to be with spirit. And you need to have a sense of surrender to spirit and not have your fears, not have your ego be in the way. So when I go to meditate now, part of what I'm centering to is this practice of, I do not have all answers. I'm a conduit and a messenger for spirit. I need to come back to center so that I can hear those messages and respond to those indications in as pure way as I can. But none of it is actually about me. I don't have any special powers of any kind that I can, purport to own, let alone declare to others as an all-knowing power of some kind, or that I have a special pathway to spirit. I just know how to cultivate my clarity so that spirit can work through me. That's all I do.
Yes. That's such a humbling thing, right? Because there's a recognition that which I have been bequeathed with doesn't make me a super special human being, right? But also it doesn't make me the person who holds, I like that, truth with a capital T. But here's a question that might actually be interesting, which is, if you understand your gift to be a gift that has responsibility, but also a gift that doesn't necessarily give you license to direct other people, how do you behave or how do you respond? Because for example, like a comedian will say, the worst thing is when people know that I'm a comedian, they'll say, tell me a joke, right? So how then do you respond when people know that you're a healer and they go, okay, Pearl, what do you see for me? I'm going for this interview tomorrow.
Oh, okay. This is a challenging one, because part of what you're learning when you're going through initiation, ironically, is about boundaries. We don't use the word boundaries, but because I'm a psychologist, the concept is the same. The whole thing to do with knowing as a being where your scope begins and where your scope ends. And I live that way in my psychological practice, also in my healing space. I do not move myself to interfere with other people's energy fields or to interfere with other people's wisdom at any time, particularly when I'm uninvited. I just do not. My ancestors will be particularly stroppy with me if I was that way inclined, because they'd be like, what business do you think you have to go interfere with that person in this way? If we ask you to go do something, then do the thing. If we have not asked you to go do something, you're not doing the thing. But if someone then comes to me to ask me, I'm sitting at a cafe and they find out I'm a healer and then they start asking me to divine things or to say things, I'm also really well practiced at knowing time and place. It's time and place. A cafe in a space somewhere where I went there with an intention of drinking a cup of tea is not the space that I'm going to go into in a frame of mind or a frame of being that's going to connect me to spirit. So intention has a lot to do with what and how I do anything at all. My intention always is to hold an energy of healing, so whoever is around me can commune with that or not. But if someone's going to ask me out of time, out of space, out of context, to be something that they want me to be, I just go back to center about the fact that that's not what I'm here for, and that's not what I've been sent to do here. I'm here to have a cup of tea. If someone is really, really insisting, I redirect. I just invite them to go and seek something with someone who's going to be available for them in this way to provide the information that they need. And that's it.
Okay. Without annoyance, without irritation, without just the thank you, that's not what I'm here for. I came to
Yes, absolutely. But there is a little tale that I can share with you, which is funny, but also was very elucidating for me. About maybe 20 years ago, I went to a restaurant and I'm all glammed up. I'm there with the partner, we're having dinner. So I'm being taken out to dinner. I'm just this girl who's with a boy having dinner. So I'm sitting at the table and I start getting a bit agitated. Something in my energy is moving and is moving and is and I'm thinking something is here and really agitating. And I'm getting distracted from being really present with the person I'm at dinner with. And I say to them, excuse me, I just need to go to the ladies. And I go to the ladies, close the cubicle, sit down, take a breath, thinking, what is this about? And I connect to this person, obviously in spirit, who is insisting that I go and do this particular thing, say this thing to this person. Can I just go and do the thing? And it's really, they just really want this thing. And they are really insistent and they are really impatient. And I was quite young in my along my journey at that time. Yes. And I needed to sit there and make a really, really clear decision, which has now held me in good stead since. I thought to myself, I came to this restaurant to be a girl having dinner with a boy.
Yeah.
I did not come here to be hijacked by any person in spirit, anything at all, who's going to distract me from being present with the person I'm here with. Then I spoke to this person in spirit. Take your request to somebody who's going to be able to help you. It's not going to be me. Not tonight. Not right now. Not at any time.
I'm a girl.
Because you do not, I'm a girl who's just out to dinner with, trying to have a good time with the boy. I am not the person that is going to be distracted, disturbed for you to come and insist that you want something for you that you want done by me. And you have not even been courteous enough and polite or respectful enough to actually be requesting something, to see if I was available to offer something. You are insisting. You've actually moved me from the table to come into a space so that I can, engage with you. This is rude behavior. Rude behavior. And it was the first time that I was able to assert a boundary with someone in spirit. And I was as clear as day that this was not going to be happening. You go and ask someone else. You go and bother someone else. It's not going to be me.
Not tonight.
Took a breath, washed my hands, took another breath, went back to my dinner with the boy, enjoyed the rest of the dinner with the boy.
She's like, amateur.
Yes. So when people are, whether they're alive or in spirit, are not respecting space and time, time and context, you do need to be strong enough to actually assert a boundary and educate politely, but you educate with the clarity and with firmness, because there are people who in life do not respect other people's boundaries, are going to be interrupting you at any turn, feel entitled that they need to come and demand what they want because they have needs, with very little thought about you. So I need, as a woman, as a person, and also as a spiritual being, look after self and have a level of self-preservation and a level of self-respect that I also can then extend to other people. But I will not be responding to someone who's going to come at me, transgressing, demanding, not respectful at any time. I never have, even as a child, I was never able to do that and accommodate people who were rude and, unreasonable. And I still don't. So no one's going to use the language of faith, use the language of spirits, use the language of love, use the language of whatever to camouflage a basic disrespect.
Yes.
And that not knowing aspect that we were talking about earlier.
I love that, this idea of camouflaging disrespect. I love that. I'm like, because you have somebody say, I don't mean to offend, but, and the minute somebody starts with, I don't mean to offend, their intention is to offend.
They already know they're there. They're just telling you not to act as if you don't realize. Yeah.
I don't mean to offend, but I'm like, no, you've already caused offense. So let's just keep it moving.
moving. Yeah. So there's something then that I wanted to touch to about, a person like myself who needs to traverse different spaces. I need to always be mindful and be very clear about which space I'm inhabiting at any given time. So I also practice boundary management, as in, if I'm wearing a particular hat and I'm in a particular space for a certain purpose, that's all I'm there for. I don't go across and bring things that are in other spaces or other aspects of my life into spaces that I'm in. I'm not confused. I'm never confused. I'm really ordered, and I'm very boundaried. So if I'm in a session with someone and they've come because I'm a psychologist, that's the modality I'm going to use. That's all we're going to be doing, and that's fully what I'm going to be available to provide for that person. If I'm dealing with spirit, or the ancestors have come in, or as I call them, the old people have come because they are requesting that I hold a ceremony, or I attend to something, or I go somewhere, that's the space I go into with that very clear intention and a sense of being a messenger for something. And I'm really clear about what I'm doing there and why I'm doing that. So I wanted to just touch on this because it's quite important for people who wear different hats in life. People like me who have dualities about them. When I'm home, I speak Zulu. And when I'm in Australia, I speak English. When I'm home, I'm a child of Africa who grew up in a certain context in a certain way. When I'm in Australia, I'm a child of the diaspora who's here with permission of the traditional owners of Australia, but who is here also for a human mission. I'm never confused about those things. And in any other spaces that I'm in, if I'm doing something, I'm always very clear about what I'm there for and why and what I'm meant to be doing there.
You are touching on something that is so important, because now you have language in the zeitgeist around adaptability. You've alluded to boundaries. You've alluded to this idea of balancing duality. And what you're offering to the community who will be reached by this message is the encouragement to self-defy, right? You don't respond to outside stimuli you self-define so that you then can enter that space with a clarity. I love this idea of I'm not confused. I am not confused.
And one can say sweet nothings to me. One can shout at me. One can appeal to me. One can, threaten me. People, in terms of that external stimuli, people can be who they need to be. It doesn't change who I am. It doesn't change what I need to do. It doesn't disturb the path I'm on, and it doesn't confuse my essence, if you like. And this distinction of being able to be in yourself, in your spirit, and not be so easily distracted by what's outside of yourself is a real skill, especially when you're a healer. You need to be able to, center and be fully in the space you are in the energy you are in, regardless of the mayhem or chaos that might be around you. And I often say this when I'm, training psychologists, and I say, when things are ticking along okay, I use a certain type of part of my brain to manage things and make sure things are at an equilibrium. Give me a crisis, and I go into a deeper sense of calm, like a deeper sense of calm. Because then I distance myself from the chaos, and I marshal and I order the chaos. And you need a distillment of a certain kind to be able to respond to chaos and crisis. You can't be in the chaos and crisis. And in a way, maybe that is a motif for life for me. Part of why I meditate, part of why I spend time alone or connect with, ancestors, engage in ritual, is so that I'm most able to separate from the chaos and the noise of life around me. And the self-discipline that comes with that. Because it can always seem like it's real fun to go, be partying until 4 o'clock in the morning, night after night after night. I know I can't do that, And there's lots of other similar things of equivalent to party until 4 a.m. I just don't engage with those things because there's a self-preservation, but also there's a responsibility that comes with holding a particular space that's been bequeathed to you. And there's a cleanliness you need to maintain. There's a housekeeping aspect you need to maintain. And there's a regard that you need to have for that space. And a reverence, if you like, for that space.
I love that. You hear things like charity begins at home. And these are cliches, right? And I'll say to people, but you are home. When people say charity begins at home, you are home. But if you are not home in your home, then how are you going to function and be a contributor in the world, right? So
I love the language you are using because it's my language. It is I cannot believe it. This is why we are sisters, because it's absolutely my language. And when I'm counseling, when I'm mentoring, and this is what I actually use self as home. I use the word home. And I say, with all of this distress, someone might be going through really difficult things. I say to them, for us to be able to progress and manage what's happening here, we need to just come back home. Let's start at home. Because there's peace at home. There can be tranquility at home. There can be strength at home. But you can close the doors and the windows at home and restart. But you also have a lot more control of what's happening at home before then you step out and start engaging with all troubles. And there's that metaphor is a really, really important one to be reminded of. And I think even, home as in self being home, but also home being your actual physical home, it needs to be a sanctuary for your spirit. It needs to be a place where you come back to rest and to recharge and to have peace. So you might be in turmoil, but home, in self and physically at home, is an opportunity for you to receive the tonic that you need to have, to be the tonic you need to be,
and to be tethered in the sense of just knowing that you are here to do great things, and you have a responsibility to use your unique skills and talents to do amazing things. Right? Yeah.
Yes.
Oh man.
And it gives you the strength to be able to do the things you need to do. Because when you are weary and you are fatigued, and you need encouragement, and you need to remember who you are, why you are. You need to come home to do that.
I'm going to put this on a t-shirt. When you need to remember who you are, you need to come home. There is such a, these messages, by the way, that you have shared today is a wisdom that we will feed on for years to come, largely because the world is so loud at the moment, Pearl.
Yes.
That we can't, and I've often said to people that spirit speaks in a whisper. Until you can stand still, you can't hear that voice. Because there's no way you can hear a whisper at a doof doof, right? Like it's just not going to happen. So what you've offered counsel that applies in our personal lives. You've offered counsel that applies in our professional lives, because there seems to be this urgency for us to do. And I'm hearing you inviting us to be. I'm hearing you say, just go back to that place where you can just be. Because then you have perspective. Perspective gives you distance. It gives you a sense of calm. It gives you an ability to think clearly. And then you can go out into the world and be this fierce, amazing human being. Or Puma and Nadal and ends up I could keep you here forever, but I won't, because you've given us so generously. And apologies for our technical glitches. I before I let you go though,
yes,
please tell me this. What is, because this podcast is called Future Readiness, and you have invoked in me, and I know that you will evoke in others, an understanding of how to deal with this and how to deal with the next. But how would you answer, what does future readiness mean to Pearl?
This is something that's come into my consciousness relatively recently. Because when, you come back home and to self and you reflect deeply, you can choose and then you can re-choose, but also you can be offered some insights because there's a quiet. So one of those for me has been the journeying in terms of my moving from mother continent to Australia, and I go to other continents as in traveling in other countries at other times. There's something in that in terms of being an energy that is charting a path and a course that's reconnecting energies. That's one. And two, there's going to be a phase now in my second half of life that's going to be beginning, maybe has begun, for me to impart a sense of the ancient that we carry in us as African people to the future that's coming, which is very technological, which is very removed from grounded energy sources. So, and we need young people to be able to be in touch with the source in terms of where we've come from and what we carry, and the wisdom that is not technologically transmitted, and be able to be the energies that are going to be fusing that with technologies and the advancements that are being made. Because we're going to need both of those elements for our enrichment as human beings, and for the generations that are going to be coming, who are going to be invited to be part of a technological revolution that has begun, but whose spirits are going to be needing to be reminded of who they are in that.
Oh, man.
So there's much work that's going to need to be happening maybe in the next while, at least for me and maybe for others, to provide this fusion and be able to convey the importance of both elements for the next generation.
This is so beautiful. What do I offer you? Because you have offered so much. I offer courage, I offer you clarity, and as others say, may harm avoid the streets you're on. Because the gift you are and the place from which you share it means that if we don't drink from what you have offered, our thirst is therefore our own problem. So I thank you. I thank you. I thank you. And oh my, I am so, like, I could hug you from through these bloody screens. I really, really could. From now on, Full Circle will be called Future Readiness with Zar, and we'll still have those thought-expanding conversations and the streams of encouragement that you enjoy. If you're already subscribed to Full Circle with Zar, you are automatically subscribed to Future Readiness with Zar, and you can continue to listen to all the conversations on the podcast platform of your choice. But also let me know if there are any specific topics or guests you would like us to host. Enjoy, like, and share. And until the very next time, I wish you clarity and courage.